as we are called to worship this morning. Let us rise to our feet as we sing together. There is a river of gladness pours from Emmanuel's veins. The sinner was plunged beneath the blood not saved. Since then I walk in forgiveness. All of my guilt was erased. Chains of the past are broken at last. The God saved. Oh my God saved. Am undone by the mercy of Jesus. I'm undone by the goodness of the Lord. I'm restored and made right. You got a hold of my life. Got Jesus. Could I want more? I'm gonna walk in forgiveness. All of my guilt was erased. Chains of the past broken at last. God saved. I received nothing but goodness. I've received nothing but goodness. I've tasted and tasted your grace. Oh, I was so lost till I felt like the cross and God saved. Oh, I got saved. I'm undone by the mercy of Jesus. I'm undone by the goodness of the Lord. I'm restored and made right. He got a hold on my life. Got Jesus. Could I want more? The love of God gave me His pardon. The love of God won't let me say the same. The love of God calls me up higher. It's more stronger. That's why I got saved. I'm undone by the mercy of Jesus. I'm undone by the goodness of the Lord. I'm restored and made right. You got a hold on my life. Got Jesus. How could I want more? I'm undone by the mercy of Jesus. I'm undone by the goodness of the Lord. I'm restored and made right. Got a hold on my life. Got Jesus. How could I want more? I've got Jesus. How could I want more? I've got Jesus. How could I want more? Amen. You may be seated.
All right. Well, good morning, Elmont. Like Niall said, we are a bit light today. We've got a good group gone to kids camp. We have 14 kids and 3 adults, including Sarah and Kristen, are gone to that. My wife just can't keep her at home. She's traveling again. She's up in Washington, D.C. right now. She gets back tomorrow, and my daughter, Elena, is with my parents in Fort Worth. June's out with she had some family in town. They had car trouble, so she's helping them this morning, and then Grace is with some family. So we've got a bunch of folks out today. But I'm so glad that you're here, and we are going to have a good service today, and we're going to worship Christ together and pray together and hopefully come out of here challenged and changed. And so welcome to Elmont. Our community group that meets every other week will next meet on August the 5th, so not tomorrow, but the next week. And we're still going through our book, Strange Religion, How the First Christians Were Weird, Dangerous, and Compelling. So if you want to come, let me know. I'll get you a book, and you can join with us. We do want to be praying for kids camp. They get back from kids camp on Tuesday. They are in Brownwood, Texas. And the big thing we have coming up is this Saturday. We have our backpacks and school supplies giveaway. It is Saturday from 6 to 8 p.m. Some of you talked to Sarah and told her that you want to help with that, so thank you for doing that. I'll be there as well. We'll start setting up around 4 o'clock, if you're helping. And so if you can get there as early as 4 and help kind of get things organized, and then by 6 o'clock people will start showing up, and they'll go until 8 o'clock. We still have some needs, and as far as supplies go, and so if you want to sign up for stuff in the foyer, you can. If you want to bring it by the church during the week and you don't have a key, let me know. We'll make sure we're here to open it up and let you in. Catherine, our secretary, she's in the office from 2 to 5 on Saturdays, so the office will definitely be open then, but I can let you in other times as well. So that'll be this Saturday. And if you do buy backpacks, do remember that Conley and La Vega both require clear backpacks now, so we're only doing the clear backpacks. And then just an update on our activity center and the ceiling repairs. We do have a church that looks like they're going to be helping us some, and we're going to be able to get the cost down considerably. We don't know exactly how much, and we'll probably have to do some of the work, and we're still kind of figuring out all the details of how all that is going to work, but it is not going to cost $30,000. We can be assured of that. It is going to cost should be significantly less than that. But continue to pray about that, giving towards that, because there will certainly still be a significant cost involved. But I wanted to update you on that. So those are our announcements. Let's spend a few minutes greeting one another with our welcome waves, hugs, and howdies. Well, in 2006, on the island of Tasmania, there was a tragedy in the environment. The population of Tasmanian devils had a massive death. 40% of the population died within that year. Tasmanian devils are the animal made famous by the Looney Tunes cartoons. They actually look quite a bit different in real life, but they don't look very friendly, and they aren't very friendly. And that led to this issue. Initially, scientists suspected a virus, because that would make sense, right? You have this mass wave of death in a population. That's the first thing that comes to your mind. But it wasn't that at all. It actually turned out to be a type of mouth cancer. And as they studied it, what was interesting was that the abnormalities in the cancer tumors were exactly the same in each animal. And what that meant was that it had a common source. There was a single Tasmanian devil who had this type of cancer, who then spread it to another, who spread it to another, who spread it to another. How'd this happen? Well, Tasmanian devils do what my 2 dogs at home do, and maybe some of your animals do it well. They wrestle with their mouths, and they bite at each other. And as they bite at each other, they make little wounds. Sometimes they're playing, sometimes it's a little more serious, but they wrestle and they fight with their mouths, and so they bite at each other around the mouth area, and in doing so, they spread this cancer. These animals died, 40% of the population, because of cancer spread from biting one another. Now, human beings don't bite each other too often. That's not really what this sermon is about. However, if you do that, please stop. That is not appropriate. That is unsanitary, and it's probably illegal. So don't do that. But that's not a common problem among humans over the age of 3. But we do bite each other with our words, don't we? We do bite each other that way. And today, James is going to warn us about a specific way that we bite each other with our words that can spread like cancer and cause great destruction in the church. We're still in our book on James that we're calling Faith, a Work in Progress, written by James, the half-brother of Jesus, who was pastoring the church in Jerusalem during a time of persecution, of famine, of poverty, and during a time where there was conflict in the church over several issues. In recent weeks, as we've gone through James, he's been addressing the teachers and the leaders in the church and how the power of their words can cause great harm or great good, and so to guard their tongues. He said in James chapter 3, verse 5, he said, "Consider what a great force is set on fire by a small spark. And the tongue also is a fire, a world of evil among the parts of the body. It corrupts the whole body, sets the whole course of one's life on fire, and is itself set on fire by hell." Our tongues are powerful. 2 weeks ago, which was our last message from James in chapter 3, verse 13, James spoke about how humility must undergird everything for the believer in Christ, and certainly for those teaching and leading. He said, "Who is wise and understanding among you? Let them show it by their good life, by deeds done in humility that comes from wisdom." He said that humility would lead to peace. He said the wisdom that comes from above is first of all pure, then peace-loving. It's considerate, it's submissive, full of mercy and good fruit, impartial and sincere. Peacemakers who sow in peace reap a harvest of righteousness. That's a harvest of right acts. That's peace in the church as we commit to being peaceful. The opposite of humility is envy and selfish ambition. And this, of course, leads to the opposite of peace. It leads to quarrels. It leads to strife in the church, which apparently they were experiencing. And so he asks them rhetorically in chapter 4, verse 1, what causes fights and quarrels among you? Don't they come from your desires that battle within you? And then he reminded them in chapter 4, verse 6, that God opposes the proud and he shows favor to the humble. So with all that background in mind about humility and peace and opposing selfish ambition and all those things, today we conclude James's of teachers and the tongue with a very specific use of the tongue that he not only warns us against, but also reveals the high stakes involved when we violate this warning. And so he says in chapter 4, verse 11, brothers and sisters, do not slander one another. Well, that's it. We can go home, right? That's easy enough. I wish it were that simple. I wish it were that simple that we could do what Bob Newhart said in his Immortal Words when he said, stop it. That we could just stop it. We could just not slander one another. I wish it was that simple. What is slander? Slander, and especially this word in the Greek, has a little bit broader connotation than simply the word that we're translating into slander. It really means to speak evil against somebody. And that, of course, includes slander, and that's a big part of it. It means to label and defame people, to degrade them, to speak falsely against them, to lie with the intention of harming or discrediting someone, or it can also apply to truths. Truths spoken out of turn and with ill intent. Sometimes we know things about people that they don't necessarily want to be made public. Those of us who are in church leadership definitely know things about families that are private, that issues that they're facing, struggles they've had, maybe things they've done in the past that they're not real proud of, and they've repented of and they've confessed, but there's still issues, or maybe they're struggling with something right now. And pastors, teachers, leaders in the church, they know about these kinds of things, and we keep them confidential, as we should, unless there's a very good reason that we have to say something. We can misuse that. We can say true things that we know and cause great harm when we say things and reveal things with bad intent. And that would be included in the word that is being translated here, slander. In 1886, there was a French poet and minister named Joseph Roux. And he described slander this way. He says, slander is a verdict of guilty pronounced in the absence of the accused, with closed doors, without defense or appeal by an interested and prejudiced judge. We'll get back to that idea of being a judge in a minute, because James brings that up as well. Slander can come in a lot of different forms. Slander can come in the form of thinly veiled questions. A person is saying, well, I'm not slandering, I'm not gossiping, I'm just asking questions. But questions that are asked are implied accusations. Questions that are asked not of people who would know, people who are involved, but where we just sort of ask each other things, questions that plant seeds of harm in the minds of others. Questions like, how do you think Bill had the money to buy that new car? Or, do you think something is going on between Tom and Jenny? They didn't think that before, but they might now. Do you think, maybe something does go wrong in the church? Maybe there's something that happens and someone is guilty of something. Someone might ask, do you think someone else was in on it? Do you think this person was involved, even though there's no evidence or reason to suggest that they were. But now the seed of doubt is planted. Now we've tarnished the reputation by simply asking around, do you think? Do you think? Maybe it's a doctrinal issue. Maybe we suspect someone believes something that they shouldn't. And so we don't ask them directly, we ask other people, do you think Marjorie really believes this? Do you think Marjorie really thinks the Bible is accurate about this? Do you think Bill would say something different about this? We question that way. We can do this in all sorts of different ways. We can do this with appearance. Look at what this person is wearing. Do you think they are fill in the blank? Rather than going and talking to them directly. We can ask questions in ways that slander people. The Bible takes slander very seriously, from beginning to end. In Proverbs, Solomon describes some things that the Lord hates. And most of these things are included in slander. He says, there are 6 things the Lord hates, 7 that are detestable to him. Haughty eyes, a lying tongue, hands that shed innocent blood, a heart that devises wicked schemes, feet that are quick to rush into evil, a false witness who pours out lies, and a person who stirs up conflict in the community. Most of that is slander. Most of that involves slander. Haughty eyes, that means a proud look, that means arrogance, which is what a lot of this flows from. A lying tongue, saying untrue things about people. Shedding innocent blood, maybe not literally, but we can murder someone's character. Wicked schemes. Slander has a goal. Slander intends to harm. A false witness who pours out lies, and a person who stirs up conflict in the community, dividing people through their accusations and insinuations and backbiting. In Psalm 101, David says, whoever slanders their neighbor in secret, I will put to silence. Whoever has haughty eyes and a proud heart, I will not tolerate. God hates slander. Now you may be thinking, but what if we really do have questions? What if we really do have reasons to believe or suspect that someone has done something wrong and it needs to be addressed? Well, the Bible does provide for that without slandering people. In Galatians chapter 6, verse 1, Paul says, brothers and sisters, if someone is caught in a sin, you who live by the Spirit should restore that person gently. But watch yourselves, or you may also be tempted. You address the person privately. You address them gently. You seek to restore them. You don't spread the suspicion by asking other people that aren't involved. You go to them directly. You go to them directly, you giving them the benefit of the doubt whenever possible. You go to them with the intention of it being for their own good. If there is someone who is an authority over them or who is meant to provide accountability to them, maybe you do go to them and you ask them and you get them involved too. But even then, in most cases, you should still go to the individual directly first. There are some exceptions to that. We've talked about that before. I won't go into that today. But in most cases, you should go to the individual first. That's uncomfortable, isn't it? It's hard to go to the person directly. Most of us are conflict averse. We don't like confrontation, and so it's so much easier just to go and ask someone else. And in doing so, we can slander someone by spreading suspicion or accusation when we could have solved it by just going to the person directly and working it out. Why do we slander? Why do we do it? Well, we already looked at that a couple weeks ago where James, he says, what causes fights and quarrels among you? Don't they come from your desires that battle within you? We have selfish desires. We have selfish ambitions. James wasn't the only person in the New Testament to recognize this problem, even in the early church. Paul mentions this in 2 Corinthians chapter 12. He writes them, for I am afraid that when I come, I may not find you as I want you to be, and you may not find me as you want me to be. I fear that there may be discord, jealousy, fits of rage, selfish ambition, slander, and gossip. People are people, right? 2,000 years hasn't made much difference. The early church experienced this. Churches today experience this, where selfishness, jealousy, discord, whatever the source, it causes us to slander, to believe the worst. We listen to and we spread slander because part of the consequence of having a sinful nature is fascination with scandal. We're drawn like a moth to flames to things that are bad, that are salacious. Martin Luther once wrote, "Here belongs particularly the detestable, shameful vice of speaking behind another's back and slandering, to which the devil spurs us on. For it is a common evil plague that everyone prefers hearing evil to hearing good of his neighbor." Let me say that again. Everyone prefers hearing evil to hearing good of his neighbor. That's our human nature. That's our wickedness. It's easier to believe something bad about someone and be drawn to that and to spread that than something that is good. Especially people sometimes that we don't know well, or maybe someone that we're already a little on the outs with, or that we don't like as much. It's easy to believe and to spread what is false and what is harmful. When the stakes are religious in churches, emotions can get very high very quickly. And if the disagreement is about theology or practice in the church or even a leader, it can quickly be framed as, those who disagree with me disagree with God. They, the other side, are not on God's side. Therefore, they must be opposed by any means necessary, including telling others that they are fighting against God or they are not real Christians. We are very quick to assassinate people's character and even their faith when we have conflicts in the church because of the religious faith nature of the issues involved. This comes from selfishness, comes from ambition, comes from the desire to harm. The correct motives when we approach someone, when difficulties occur, and difficulties do occur, the correct motives are restoration of the person, protection of others from harm by the person, and protection of the church's integrity and reputation and ministry. Those are our priorities. And that is done when we are gentle and when our speech is seasoned with salt, and when we are committed to building up and not tearing down. The consequences of slander, they're pretty obvious. The one that James is most concerned about here and that Paul also mentioned is there's division in the church. We divide. We find ourselves on different sides because of an accusation, because of something that we think might be going on. An accusation gets made and people feel like they have to take sides for or against it, and so division occurs, which is why you handle things privately first to avoid those divisions in the church. You handle it privately if at all possible. And if someone is just stirring the pot and you're on the receiving end of it and you're hearing the slander, what do? You shut it down. You shut it down, and you shut it down as publicly or as privately as they have made it. What do I mean by that? I mean that if you're in a one-on-one conversation with someone and they say something to you that is more of a slanderous nature, it's negative, it's tearing the other person down, then between the two of you, you put an end to it right there. You make it clear that you will not entertain or be a party to that kind of talk. You tell them that they need to go to that person if they have a problem with them and go work it out. If, however, you are part of a larger group and someone is slandered in a larger group, someone brings it up in a larger group and asks a question or makes an accusation or is tearing someone down in front of a group of people, you fix it in front of that group of people. You have the courage to not go along with the crowd, to not just be part of the problem. You have the courage to stand up and say, no, we're not going to do that here. We're not going to spread that here. You need to apologize. You need to stop. If you have a problem, you need to go to that person. That way, everyone that has heard it knows that that was inappropriate, and so that hopefully they won't go and spread it to the next person. And so you you address it as privately or as publicly as the person doing the slandering has made it. We've got to protect churches. When real harm does come, when someone really does make a mistake, sometimes those things are going to happen. Sometimes leaders are removed, and sometimes division is almost unavoidable. But if at all possible, we avoid that by handling things privately and stopping things before they get too big when it comes to our words. Division is dangerous. Diminishment also is dangerous. Sometimes churches divide. Sometimes churches simply diminish because of all the squabbling. Splits may come. People may choose their sides and find themselves on one side or the other. But some people aren't going to choose a side. You know what some people are going to do? They're just going to see what's going on and say, I'm done. I don't want to be a part of this. And they'll walk away. Maybe they'll go and they'll try to find another church that is a little bit healthier, or they may simply decide that church isn't worth it, that Christians aren't any different from the rest of the world. They bicker and fight and stab each other in the back just like everyone else. And so, what's the point? And they walk away from the church. That's what slander can do. It leads to embarrassment for the church because, as we've talked about many times, we're to be known for our love for one another. When we slander one another and hurt one another and divide over selfish ambitions, the community sees it. The world sees it. It's part of why the church is not known in our world today by most people as being a place of peace, as being a place of unity, but rather a place where a lot of conflict happens. Our reputation is not great in this area. It needs to change. And it can change, partly if we are careful with our words and how we talk to and about one another. There's another consequence of slander is it destroys the lives of individuals. It can wreak havoc. It can destroy reputations unnecessarily. People can be innocent, or they can be partly innocent. Maybe they didn't do quite the way it was. But the lie, the slander, it spreads. Lies spread so much faster than truth and corrections. We see this in the news all the time. Even when a news story is reported falsely and the organization that does it has to issue a correction, the correction never makes the rounds as quickly or as broadly as the initial error. Never. When someone lies publicly, that spreads. When someone tries to correct it and correct it with truth, it goes slowly. It's so hard to fight slander, and so we nip it at the source. We stop it before it starts. We don't engage in it. It destroys people. When I was growing up, there was a guy in our church. He played the organ. And this guy was a really nice guy. He was faithful. He was always there. People liked him, but he talked and he carried himself in a way that was a little different. And this led to, I was a teenager at the time. When he first came to the church, he was there for a long time. This led to the persistent rumor that he was gay. Now, there was no evidence that he was. There was never any evidence that he was. But he talked and he carried himself in a way that made people talk about this. Now, I don't know if anyone ever asked him that question directly or not. Certainly, a lot of things happened in the church and in his life that I'm unaware of, so I fully don't know the whole story, and I know that. I hope if someone had real concerns that they did address it with him directly. I do know that there was a lot of asking those kinds of questions. Do you think Anthony is whatever? Do you think? Whispering when he wasn't around. There's a lot of talk. Eventually, he took his own life. Slander destroys. Questions that are accusations destroy. Questions that are meant to harm and spread rumors rather than actually seek to build up someone and help destroy. Slander is serious. what are we doing when we slander? We've already seen the consequences, and they're severe. What are we actually doing? James puts this in very serious terms that are actually rather striking. He goes on in chapter 4, verse 11, the second part of that verse. He says, anyone who speaks against a brother or sister or judges them speaks against the law and judges it. When you judge the law, you are not keeping it, but sitting in judgment on it. Now, this verse at first can be kind of confusing because the logic is a bit hard to follow. How does James get from, okay, yeah, don't slander people, okay, we're tracking with that, to if you do it, you're judging the law itself? Like, what is the logical path that James is following here? Here's what it seems to be, and we can see this in part by what he says in chapter 4, verse 12 in a minute, where he says, there is only one lawgiver and judge, the one who is able to save and destroy, but you, who are you to judge your neighbor? We think what's going on here is that when he talks about the law, he's talking about the greatest law, which is loving God and loving your neighbor. And Jesus said that all the law is summed up in that. And so what James seems to be saying here is that when you judge someone, when you slander someone, you are acting as their judge. You are failing in the command to love your neighbor when you slander them. And when you fail to follow the command to love your neighbor and you slander them, then what you are saying is you know better than the law. You are judging the law. That command to love your neighbor as yourself, you're basically saying, you know what? I know better. And in the church, where again, there's faith and religious connotations to the conflicts, I need to solve that problem. That person is a problem, and therefore, I need to solve it this way. I mean, I'm going to solve it without loving them. And so we judge the law as insufficient. The command of our neighbor we set aside, and we become judges of the law itself. And then he says, there is only one lawgiver and judge, the one who is able to save and destroy. But you, who are you to judge your neighbor? And so James ramps it up even higher if possible. He says there's only one lawgiver and judge. In other words, now when you do this, when you slander, when you fail to love your neighbor and you judge the law and you put yourself over it, you are putting yourself in the place of God as judge over that person. You are making the choice to destroy that person, and that is God's job alone. God can save, God can destroy, because God is perfectly just and all-knowing. He can do that. You cannot, but you are putting yourself in that place when you slander someone. Because you are judging, you are deciding to destroy them. And James asks the question, who are you to do that? Will you be the judge? It's, of course, rhetorical. It's meant to put these people, his church, and the people that he's writing to, it's meant to put them in their place. It's meant to call them back to the humility that's already been the theme of so much that we've talked about. By mentioning that God saves and destroys, God is warning them of God's judgment if they don't repent. Because who are they, who are we to put ourselves in the place of God in his role as judge? Can't do it. Can't do it. If we find that we have done that, if we are convicted and we realize, you know what, I've done this. I have slandered someone. I have spoken evil against someone. I have spread things that were false about someone carelessly, or I have spread true things about them in the form of gossip that were intended to harm. I have sought to hurt them with my words and tear them down. If we realize that we've done that, here's what we do. We repent, which of course means to turn and go the other direction. We stop doing it. We stop it, right? We apologize to whoever we've slandered. We own up to it. We take full responsibility, and we ask their forgiveness. We seek to do all we can to repair and restore that person's reputation to the people that we have spread that slander to. We seek to make it right as much as we possibly can. And if we're in leadership, if we're a pastor, if we're a teacher, and we have slandered and we have hurt somebody, we may need to take some time off to get our hearts right. Because when teachers and leaders do this, all this destruction is so much easier because people follow. But it's not just teachers and leaders, is it? By expanding it at the end here where he says, who are you to judge your neighbor? Notice beforehand he's been talking about your brother and sister in Christ. By expanding it to your neighbor, James makes it really clear that, hey, yeah, this applies to teachers and leaders in the church, but really it applies to everyone. It applies to everybody. Every one of us needs to consider how we're using our words, who we're seeking to destroy and hurt with our words, who we're speaking carelessly about, who we're judging. So as we close out this time, I just want us to think about that. Think about our words. Who is it easy for you to say false things against? Who is it easy to believe the worst and then spread the worst without even checking to see if it's true? Who is it easy to go around asking questions about and raising suspicions about because you already don't like them for some reason, you already suspect them for some reason? Who has made you angry? Who has hurt you? Sometimes we do this in response to slander, right? Someone does something to us. Maybe someone slandered you. Maybe someone said something untrue about you, and you're thinking, you know what? I know something about you, buddy. Right? I can say some things, and we're tempted to respond that way. We can't do it. We don't judge. We don't act as judge. We don't seek to destroy. We discern. Absolutely, we discern. We restore. Absolutely, we go and we try to restore people. We protect people from the harm of others. We absolutely do that. And we protect the church. But we don't judge. That's God's job. So, who are you judging? Who are you seeking to destroy with your words? Who are we judging with our destructive words? That's the question James has for us today. And that's the warning that when we do so, we're putting ourselves in the place of God, and we've got to back down. So if that's you today, and God has brought things to your mind, I'll just encourage you to use this time of response to do what we've talked about. To begin that process of confessing your sin to God and repenting of it. To committing to a different path. And then, even now, here in this room, to start formulating, okay, how am I going to make this right? Who do I need to apologize to? Who do I need to correct that person's reputation to where I've harmed them? How do I need to do that? Let's spend some time, as Nal leads us in song, just to reflect on how we need to take responsibility for our words.